before we get going. Hi, Debbie, and hi, everyone. Glad you're joining us today. I do want to make this is February already, and so January we had an Empowered Women's in-person retreat, and we have another one coming up in Austin, March 8th through 10th, and it was amazing and healing. And I was sharing with somebody earlier today. Debbie was there, and she will be at the one in Texas as well. But I was sharing with someone, we could see the transformation in people in just that weekend. That their faces were softer, that like you could see that they were more in their body. You could see that they were, I don't want to say calmer because I don't want it to be this facade of, but like there is amazing healing that goes on. And then I was talking to someone afterwards, like a week or two down the line, and they were talking about, that it was the layers, that they were getting in touch with those layers of healing. So if you are a betrayed partner and you're ready to do some healing work for you, I would invite you to check that out. I'll put the link in the chat, but on the Seeking Integrity site under betrayed partners, you'll see the top thing is the Empowered Women Retreat. And we would welcome the opportunity to support you on this journey as well. So it doesn't magically fix everything, but man, oh man, like visible shift. So anyway, that's my little, I want more people to get more healing. So Debbie, what do you have for us today?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned the retreat because I came home from that Empowered Women's Retreat because we did do some work on anger there. So I
Mm,
decided I was going to do a little bit deeper dig into that because I do see it showing up in my office all the time, repeatedly. And it is a part of the betrayal trauma experience, unfortunately. It is wrapped into that grief. And so it is a process as to how it shows up and then how to recognize it and then how to resolve it or work on it in your healing process. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I came across a study that I want to share a little bit with you because I felt like it was an assessment that had some really good data so that you don't feel like you're alone. You'll understand that the anger you're experiencing, what's triggering your anger, how to work through your anger. There's a commonality amongst all of us who have experienced betrayal trauma. So I came across an article, it was actually written for clinicians, for therapists, and it's on betrayal trauma anger, which I loved. So it talked about, that anger that is related to that intimate betrayal. And the article talks about how complex, right, the broken trust is and all the many layers to it. And as a result of that sexual betrayal, there is anger. Unfortunately, in the past, there's been a bit of a lens that we look at the betrayed partners through as if somehow it's a pathological thing, that they shouldn't be getting angry. So, for many years, the standard treatment was to kind of identify it as, gosh, the betrayed partner's a co addict, they're codependent. And sometimes they would get a pathological diagnosis. But fortunately for us, we have now the prodependence lens that we look through. So we are not going to pathologize the anger. What we want to do is look at it and recognize that it's there for a reason. It's there because there has been this attachment injury. There's been a disconnection that has occurred. So we're going to look at this through, again, not only the prodependence lens, which also has an attachment lens, is that sometimes we're using anger to, in a kind of a roundabout way, create safe connection and attachment. So the betrayed partner has such a desire to stay connected to the addict partner that oftentimes they go into behaviors, we call them safety seeking behaviors, to try to assist them in understanding, is this person safe and secure? So, what this survey, a couple of things that came out of it, they did a survey of 297 women who had experienced that betrayal trauma. And what it showed was that of all of those women, that there were 84% reported experiencing anger as a part of their betrayal trauma experience. And it was anger at a higher level than they had previously experienced. 40% of the respondents said that they experienced anger on a daily basis. And I think it depends on where you're at in that betrayal trauma recovery process. So, definitely anger is what I see presenting in my office, multiple times a week, and rightfully so. So I want to normalize the fact that anger is a natural, normal part of the betrayal trauma experience. So betrayed partners are experiencing anger and it's kind of attached to that PTSD, that relational trauma, which makes it very, very intense. Remember, there's been psychological devastation. This is a reaction to the event. It's to an experience that's happened to them that is unfair. And it is not something that they did to create it. So there's this fairness, unfairness that goes on for the betrayed partner. So, with anger being part of the betrayed partner's journey, we have to make sure that in that anger, that there is a safe intensity with the emotion and that we can eventually put things in place in the recovery where it will lessen and soften and it will be less frequent until it slowly diminishes. Or if it does come up, it's not going to come up to the same degree, and you're quickly going to have some skills and tools to help you reduce it. So, in the recovery journey, a couple should expect and prepare for anger. So, betrayed partners may have constant anger that they can't shake off in the early days. They may have times where they have no anger, and all of a sudden something triggers them, and all of a sudden the addict partner's blindsided because the anger's back again. You need to understand that anger is a role, that anger plays a really specific role for the betrayed partner in their recovering process because it is a common and healthy reaction to traumatic events, to the violations that have occurred as a result of their addict partner's behaviors, to the fact that boundaries have been broken, that their mind and their body have taken a hit. So anger is going to happen. So it's interesting that in this study, they asked partners what were some of the betrayal trauma triggers that caused them to have anger. So I'm going to share some of them with you because I think they're very insightful. One of them is the thought that how could you? How could you do this to me? So that constant questioning. Um, so they have anger when they go to their addict partner and they have a question, and then the addict partner gets defensive. That's a trigger for their anger. It could be hearing certain names, hearing certain words or phrases. It could be images that flash up in their head that represents the betrayal or the betrayals. It could be the addict partner avoiding to talk. They don't want to talk about the betrayal, and the betrayed partner needs that. It might be the betrayed partner remembering a special event in their life, and during that time, the addict partner was betraying them. That one comes up a lot, at least in my office recently, has been coming up a lot. It's also another trigger is thinking about the time and the money that has been spent with the addict partner's addiction. Another one is a belief that the addict partner has not had the same type of consequences that have happened to you, right? I often hear betrayed partners talk about, I just want him or her to feel the same level of pain that I have felt. And oftentimes they use their anger as a tool for hoping that they will get to that point where they feel the exact same type of pain. It might also, another trigger might be witnessing your children being impacted by the betrayal that you're experiencing. Oftentimes, this shows up with the betrayed partners have such a limited capacity for managing life. And if you've got children, you don't show up for them the same way. It's harder to get out of bed. It's harder to show up for all the events and get meals even on the table. I had one betrayed partner who she decided when she went into betrayal that I'm no longer doing dinner. And so it was either the addict partner had to provide dinner, pick up dinner, whatever it was, because she didn't have the capacity. She was just trying to survive in other areas of her life. Another trigger for anger is that the addict partner is not consistent with their therapy work and it doesn't build trust. So when they don't see the addict partner doing therapy, then they just don't feel like they can trust them and it creates anger. Another one is feeling like you've become a different person as a result of the betrayal trauma. That can make a partner angry. Of course, there's extreme sadness is also a trigger for the anger. And of course, that extreme feeling of loss. All of those are some of the things that trigger the anger. So we often also see that I mentioned previously that sometimes the addict partner, their anger will get triggered, right? So how it typically looks is that you come to the betrayed partner comes to the addict partner with a concern and they're angry. And all of a sudden, the addict partner's shame, their defensiveness kicks in. So they can't be fully present for the betrayed partner. They can't hold that space, they can't listen. And so we get into this back and forth. So we get into this cycle, a negative cycle where the anger that the betrayed partner has isn't being validated because that's what a betrayed partner needs. I just need you to validate that my anger is rightful. I should be able to be angry. I need you to be there to take accountability. I need you to be there to just hold that space and let me be angry rather than defending yourself. So, what we have to do is we have to, in the recovery process, we've got to get the addict partner to a place where the shame no longer runs how they react. That as they work through their shame, they can start to respond. So, very consciously recognizing that I've got to have the tolerance and the ability to allow my betrayed partner to be angry. And in this moment, I need to hold it. So, um, anger is a protective shield that helps the betrayed partner manage their betrayal trauma. So sometimes my anger creates distance. So when I get angry, automatically I can step away, or it causes my addict partner to step away. It can be a protector part. So it reminds the betrayed partner of all the things that their addict partner's done wrong. And it reminds them of the pain that has been caused as a result of their addict partner's addiction. Um, Anger can act as a form of communication, believe it or not. So sometimes when I get into my anger and I'm dealing with my addict partner, right? When I have more intensity, because this is an emotion, anger is an emotion that has a lot of energy behind it. And anger is an emotion that really gets our attention because we need to be doing something differently. So our anger is there to keep us safe, sometimes to get us what we want. And so, without that awareness of here's my anger, it's showing up for a reason, we often move into that really strong energy of anger. And so, when I'm in my anger, I may express more about my pain to my addict partner. Anger also helps the betrayed partner deal with their own shame. So, having a partner who's got a sexual addiction of any kind, and if there's even infidelity, it's very humiliating for the betrayed partner. So, shame comes up, especially if you're deciding to stay in the relationship and you're getting feedback from friends and family members saying, hey, how could you do that? There's judgment there. And so we go into our shame because we do feel judged. And so oftentimes when the betrayed partner, is experiencing shame, it shows up as anger. And oftentimes the negative belief underlying all of that is somehow I was not good enough. And because of that, my partner has this addiction. They've acted out sexually, they've watched porn. So I want to do a little side note here, and I want to talk about the difference between rage and anger because it's really important. We need to kind of recognize when we're moving out of anger, and anger can be intense at times. That's what we call the less healthier anger. And we've crossed a line and we've moved into rage. So I want to go over some criteria that I want you to think about and see if maybe you're starting to cross that line and move into a really destructive type of anger. So I want you to think about, have I had any experiences where it exceeds my healthy anger? So I know when I get really angry, but this has gone beyond it to the point where I'm losing that rational component of my brain functioning. It's almost like I have an out of body experience when this happens. I can't think clearly and logically, and I lose the ability to understand consequence. Doesn't matter to me. I'm so angry. And so oftentimes we see the betrayed partner even seeking out the ways to really hurt the spouse in a physical way. So we don't want to go there. We don't want to get into our anger that's so intense and crossing that line to rage because it is so destructive to the relationship. And remember, the goal is we're trying to repair connection. So I want to share a little bit about, you know, um, what the negative results were that betrayed partners experienced. And this is what they reported in the study. So, oftentimes we are limbic. Most of the time we're limbic when we're having anger. And it's interesting when we're operating out that part of our brain. Remember, we're not thinking logically, we're not thinking critically. So oftentimes after the anger is over, we experience different feelings. So some of the ones that we reported were, I blacked out and I don't remember what I did when I was angry. Now that's because we're limbic. And even when we're in rage, that is a common symptom I see, or I hear reported rather. Another one is I become concerned about my negative thoughts. So all of a sudden I'm angry, and after the fact, I go back into my negative thoughts and I'm concerned about all of those negative thoughts. I engaged in compulsive behaviors I now regret. So this might be the betrayed partners I see go out and spend a lot of money. Um, I've had betrayed partners that have gone and acted out themselves sexually. Um, it could be I go in and I eat a lot. Partners may even go into gambling. So those are the kinds of things, those compulsive behaviors. I've spent a large amount of times ruminating over the betrayals. So the anger causes me to do that. That's a negative result of the anger. Okay. Feeling embarrassed about things I have said and done. Again, anger reduces our window of tolerance. And when it's reduced, we have a tendency to do things that we would not normally do when we were online connected to prefrontal cortex. Anger causes the betrayed partner to become fearful of what they might do. Anger causes them to cry uncontrollably for long amounts of time. Another negative result is that the betrayed partner's been told that they need to stop and change the way they're behaving when they're angry. So that's a negative result, right? I've got people making me accountable, reporting to me that my behavior is unacceptable. At times, the anger, a negative result has been that they've been physically attacked by their addict partner, their betrayer, because we're now both in our anger and it's out of control. There were some random comments that weren't included in the study. One person talked about doing self-harm as a result of the anger. Another one of the negative effects is that people minimize their anger, like family members. So when I get angry, in order for the other person to be able to handle my anger, they may minimize it back to me. Some people have expressed that they've been hurt by pounding pillows under the bed or against a wall, right? So there could be physical injury as I'm working through my anger. Another interesting one is that somebody said they rushed into plastic surgery after their partner's affair and realized after the fact that it was because there was anger as a result of their anger. And our anger creates distance, right? Not only with our addict partner, but even with other people. So that's what I wanted to share about rage. One of the things we need to be aware of is, okay, how do I get out of the anger? What are some of the steps that I can do? So, like I mentioned earlier, for both the betrayed partner and the addict partner, and I'm kind of going to talk more about the betrayed partner right now, but it applies to both. We can use anger as an opportunity for self-awareness. So we have to kind of slow things down. That's what I tell my clients. When I get angry, what I want to do is I want to jump in. I'm limbic and I am angry and I'm going to handle it right now. But we've got to stop and we've got to identify, why am I angry? What's the meaning here? I often tell my clients, go into the last story you were in. Think about what you were just thinking and see what it was that triggered your anger. And then ask yourself, how do I need my anger to help me now? So how is my anger helping me in this moment? Right? And another thing is, I need to check in and see, are there any other underlying emotions? Because anger is considered a secondary emotion, a surface emotion. And underneath that is typically the hurt, the abandonment, the extreme sadness. So we need to just really get curious about the anger and ask ourselves, okay, so what is the anger making me aware of? Okay, what do I need to do differently right now with this anger? Can I slow it down? Can I think about it? Can I journal before I then express my anger? And how can I create a healthier outcome with my anger? How can I use it to my benefit? We need to be aware of how often our anger is showing up. And if the anger is not subsiding, then we need to reevaluate and look at, gosh, if my anger keeps going on like this, are there some safety concerns, not only for me, the betrayed partner, but also for the addict partner? Is there any underlying shame that we haven't addressed? So the shame keeps getting triggered. And like I said earlier, this really shows up with the addict partner. And then are there any previous traumas, right, that my body goes back into that gets triggered that I need to identify and then address and process? Because oftentimes I will work with clients at times at processing their anger in session, and that will help reduce it. So we'll do something like EMDR or accelerated resolution therapy, and it's very, very helpful. You also need to identify how you express your anger and choose. You have to make a conscious choice to move into healthier anger. So it's that concept of I've got to respond, which means I slow it down, I create a pause, I stay connected to prefrontal, I'm in my logic before I do something versus react, which is very automatic, it's very limbic. So when we get to this place where both the addict partner, the betrayed partner can respond, what ends up happening is we're creating safety for both of them. And we can start to share the underlying pain. We can say we're angry, we can talk about the underlying pain, and it cannot go out of, it doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be intense, it doesn't have to be hurtful. It can be productive. The problem is if the addict partner does not work on their shame or take accountability, it makes it even harder for the betrayed partner to get out of their anger. So the betrayed partner may hold on to their anger and use it as a protection if they feel like their addict partner is unsafe and not committed to their recovery. So if we can get both people doing their recovery work, doing their healing work for the betrayed partner, the addiction recovery work for the addict partner, then what ends up happening is it becomes safe to share, to be vulnerable. So we can share about anger, we can share about the profound pain, the disappointment, and we can actually create connection. So we need to have some coping mechanisms. And so I thought I'd share with you some of the coping mechanisms that some of the betrayed partners say they use to help them in those moments when they have anger. So some of them yell alone, which I like that. I tell my clients, find a place where nobody's at. And I want you to really, from your gut, I want you just to scream. My place is the car when nobody's around, doors are shut, right? And you want to make sound and noise as it comes out. So think of it really coming deep from your body and out. I can do it about 2 times and I am so exhausted. All that energy from that anger is out of my body. You can also yell into a pillow. So that's another way. Go into a room. Maybe you've got a master bedroom and you can go back into a bathroom where there's a closet. So we've got 3 layers deep of protection and scream into a pillow. Other people, they yell at their betrayer. Not the healthiest way to cope. So there's other ways to do it. Others people have hit their betrayer. Again, an unhealthy way to cope with anger. Breathing exercises, an incredibly effective way to deal with your anger. So get online, get on YouTube. I want you to look up some of the healing breathing. I love breath work. You can look at that. And following along and doing that can help you kind of move that anger out of your body. Oftentimes with my clients, I'll say, okay, where do you feel that anger in your body? And so we kind of start to work with it. So I do some work in my sessions of processing anger and finding out what it's there for. And so breathing is such an effective way to help move it out of the body. Other people cope by breaking or destroying items. Now, thank goodness on the survey, this is a very low number. So they kind of have these by percentages. And so that one, not as many people do. Um, some people walk away from their addict partner. They find that that's helpful. Others listen to music, journaling. The next one I love, calling a safe person. What a great way to talk through all of the thoughts and the feelings associated with your anger. Others do yoga or exercise, like walking. Walking is so effective because I'm doing bilateral. I'm moving my body like this. It calms the brain. One of the fastest ways to get out of anger is to do that. For others, it's talking about the betrayal. So when I talk about the betrayal, my anger, I can manage it. Some people say that nothing really calms them down except for just some time. I just need some time. And so that's kind of some of the coping mechanisms. Self-care is so important. I find that there's less episodes of anger. There's a direct association with the intensity and the frequency of anger and the amount of self-care that you're doing. So it's very important to remember that I often will ask my clients that come in when they're triggered a lot and they're in a lot of anger. One of my first questions is, how's your self-care? What are you doing for yourself? So that's typically where we go. I love the journaling. I love getting it out of your body. I love talking. I don't believe that we should stuff anger and hold on to anger, because in the long run, you're going to end up with physical issues. You're going to have sicknesses. You're going to end up with chronic illnesses. It's very important that you work with your anger. That's why I loved what we did at the retreat. They did anger releases, and in a very controlled, effective way, in a specific way. So if you've got a qualified therapist, that might be something that you ask them about if you're having a difficult time really getting it out of your body. Okay, so just briefly, I'm going to talk about just a few ways how the addict partner can support the betrayed partner when they're having anger. So when the betrayed partner is angry, so during the anger episode, what the addict partner can do is they've got to keep in mind that their betrayed partner's anger is really an effort to restore safety. And if we can kind of look at it like, my partner doesn't feel safe right now, they're angry because they want to feel safe. So you want to try to hear your addict partner really carefully and closely and listen for the fear, because most likely they're going to express in specific words what that fear is. So you want to avoid becoming defensive. If you feel like you're starting to want to interrupt and explain yourself or get angry, and walk away from the conversation, take a big deep breath, come back into your body, and just listen for the feeling words. You want to respond to your betrayed partner in a very reassuring way. I can understand why you've got anger. I would be angry too if that happened to me. You know, your anger is justified for all that you've been through. Yeah. What can I do to help you with your anger? So in that moment, do you just need me to listen? Because sometimes we just need to talk it out and get it all out of our body, but sit there in a very grounded state. So what the addict partner can do is they can acknowledge that what's happening to them is real, to the betrayed partner is real. You've got to acknowledge their reality. Even if you don't agree with how they perceive it, you need to acknowledge that that was their experience, which is a really hard, kind of a higher level skill. So if you don't have it, go in and work with it in your therapeutic sessions with your therapist. Take accountability. Don't deny anything, and just express empathy. Express those, get down to the feeling piece where you can create connection. Another thing is recognize that you, the addict partner, is on a different timeline with your anger than the betrayed partner. So remember, the betrayed partners had a very traumatic event, most likely, that occurred. They're in their PTSD, and anger is paired with that, remember? So it takes time to heal trauma. So they're constantly flooded with confusing thoughts and feelings, and there's an intensity right in the early days of betrayal. Whereas with the addict partner, kind of once I disclose, I immediately feel better. My anger may subside. So one of the worst things you can do is to say to your betrayed partner, when are you ever going to get over this? When is your anger ever going to go away? How much longer are you going to explode? How much longer are you going to hold this against me and be angry? You can't do that. You just have to expect that it's going to take them time. It's a different timeline. What you can do is, if you see them stuck in their anger, support and encourage them to go seek help. And it may not be you, it might be a very wise, trusted, safe friend, definitely a therapist who understands the betrayal process. Offer compassion, comfort, and care. The 3 C's is what I call it. So the compassion is that empathy piece. Don't be critical. Let them have their feelings, acknowledge their feelings are real, see if you can identify with their feelings. The next C is concern and accountability. So address the awareness of how your behaviors as the addict partner has affected them and why it is a source of their anger. So apologize, make amends. That is going to help the anger reduce in the betrayed partner. And then comfort them. So provide reassurance. Do some caring, loving things for them. Ask them what they need in that moment, because you're going to see that if you're trying to be safe and create connection, there's going to be a correlation in the reduction of their anger. But that has to be paired with consistent recovery, really healthy recovery over time. So we've got to have all these pieces that are part of your addiction recovery process. And then lastly, encourage your betrayed partner to get the right kind of support. Every webinar I say this, the right kind of support makes all the difference in the world. I had a new client this week that shared that they had somebody who wasn't a CSAT and they were working on some betrayal stuff. And as a result, it wasn't handled in the healthiest way. And so we're going to go back and do a little repair on some of those things. And remember, betrayed partners might isolate just like an addict partner. So encourage your partner to reach out to a trusted friend, to family members, the people, like I said, that are trustworthy. What often happens is the addict partner, their shame is so great, they don't want their partners to ever talk about it. So that's something you've got to work through because they need support. So encourage your partner to find a qualified therapist, to get into a recovery group, a support group. And then lastly, give them the personal support that they need by creating this emotional space. I call it holding space. So when my partner's angry, I'm going to allow my partner to be angry. So instead of being that sponge and absorbing it, I'm holding a container and I'm going to let all of that go into the container and I'm just going to hold it and let them express that. Because what that's going to lead to eventually is them having the ability to also share their fears, their vulnerabilities, and all their safety concerns, which is where we want to get in the recovery process. So anyway, that's a little more about anger. I hope that I've provided some helpful tools and hints because, like I said, I see it showing up on a consistent basis in my office.
Yeah, and yes, great tools. Like I was thinking, and I love the visual of like I'm holding a container. Like, and if an addict partner can just go, like even put your hands out, like do something visual, like I'm here and I'm holding this, but keeping the reminder, because as soon as it gets to I'm absorbing this and now I'm full of shame and I'm defensive and I'm using but you don't understand and but and like it all falls apart. So one of the things like you talked about, if the addict does not take responsibility and grow, it's harder for a betrayed partner. But like, I want to talk about how we don't let that be a place where we completely get stuck. Because if it's always, I'm waiting for the addict partner to really do their work, the poor betrayed partner is getting stuck because like he's not doing it. So I know that these tools, I love that you're talking about find a safe person, and it is be careful who you pick, because like even families, they can be so divisive, with things. They're like, get rid of the bomb, or what did you do that caused this? I hear that a lot. Like people, you're going like your family or their whatever should be supportive, and they're not. So it really is. I love that you talked about, a qualified therapist, our drop-in groups, our, online work groups, like they're safe places to get people that you can and talk to. And you do need to talk. The isolation is terrible, but I do think, that we can take the work to heart, for our anger, regardless of what's, it's a lot easier if they're doing the work, but it doesn't mean that we have to be, chained to what they're doing in order for us to heal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. For many of us, we don't have the opportunity to have somebody who's in recovery. And so we have to manage our anger on our own. And that's where it is so important that you do have other people you connect with. It and it may not ever be the betrayed partner if you're still in a relationship. So that's where I feel like it's so important to have a therapist who helps you understand your anger and goes deeper, helps you work on it and getting it out of your body, helping you put boundaries around it, being validated. I think that's one of the best things that happens when I'm angry is if somebody can come along and validate it, maybe somebody who can help me reframe it and look at it differently. And so that is so helpful if you don't have an addict partner who's really doing the work. The other thing is a friend, that supportive friend or family member, and it doesn't take a lot. You only need one or two people. I don't believe in having a whole army. I've talked about it many times. I believe in having, a small circle of people that are there to help support you in different ways. So for me, it was my friend I knew the best secret keeper in the world, but she was also very logical and she could look at both sides of the coin. And sometimes she could just sit and let me cry and listen, but then she would kind of bring me out of it by looking at reality. So I think we can recover from anger. We can even learn to manage our anger without the help of being in a relationship with the addict partner who's doing it just right in recovery. Chances are it's not going to, you're not going to sync up very quickly. Chances are this is way down the road when you, the betrayed partner and the addict partner, finally get on the same page and we're not going into our anger. So yes, a lot of this work is part of the healing recovery work that the betrayed partner has to do, even beginning in the early days when we're in crisis and then moving into more of the real deeper recovery work.
You talked about, like like one of the things was, I don't even remember doing it. I remember talking to somebody, it was a while ago, but it was a betrayed partner, and they had a camera in their house, and they replayed the record. She had no recollection of what had just transpired, like the language she had used, and she said things she regretted after she saw the recording. Zero recollection of it. She said, had I not seen the recording, I would have said, no, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. She was that disconnected, from that. And I can see that as a protection mechanism too. It's like you are so offline, with your thinking part of the brain, that it is just, the reaction. I love that you talked about, um, we have the ability to respond or act rather than react. I find for myself, anytime I'm reacting, it's probably not my best choice. I haven't thought it through. I love what you talked about, being curious. I use that multiple times a day. I'm curious. If I slow things down, instead of zipping off an email, if I'm like, well, let me think about this, and is this how I really want to frame it? Like, I get a better result, if I'm able to, to just slow things down and get my, thinking part of my brain back on. And I appreciated that you talked about, even if it's not the addict partner's reality, that's the betrayed partner's reality in that moment, and denying or trying to, well, let me clarify for you exactly what really, really happened, because you're wrong is, I can see the rage developing. I know for sure for me, doing my work on the rage, there was hurt, there was abandonment, there was like all of that stuff, and how much nicer to push it all away and have this extreme reaction out. And it was so hurtful to me because it kept me away from people. Like I could feel it coming up, and I would have to hold myself and not explode,
Mhm.
because I knew for sure if I let it go, I was like, it would be really bad and destructive to relationships. So fortunately, I had a really good therapist, did some EMDR, processed through those things, and I never, since that time, and that was on one specific thing, but since that time, I have not had that type of of feeling where like I'm going to like I'm kind of surprised that flames didn't come out of my head. Like it was that intense. It was scary, quite frankly. And I didn't like it, for
Yeah.
myself. So,
Yeah, and I want to add too that remember we got trauma here. So lots of times anger is part of a trauma response. And so that's why it's so important to get in with a therapist and go, okay, this might literally be you going back into trauma, like we talked about. I briefly covered it into a deeper trauma that anger is there to keep you safe, right? And it has to be there because your body and your brain, because of the trauma, believes that that's the only way to survive. So it's really important to really kind of embrace your anger and learn about
hmm
your anger.
hmm
We have to know what are the negative beliefs that feed my anger, right? What are the experiences I had in the past where I had anger or I experienced anger? For many of us, anger was experienced at a very young age. And it wasn't necessarily us, it was maybe somebody else. And so we've got all of these histories around anger and what's right and wrong and how you do it. But remember, sometimes when anger is like that deep and it's so reflexive, it's so reactive, we've got to look and see, is there trauma? So thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, well, and it had, I mean, I could not have articulated for myself. I could not have articulated it. I needed professional help to connect all those dots and be able to identify what was really going on. And it was deep and it was old and all of those things. I could not have. Yeah, I don't think I could have figured it out, with my best efforts. I really did need that, that layer of help. And wow, to have like literally, have it identified and treated. And I'm not saying EMDR magically cures everything, but in that particular, for that situation, it literally did. So, so I'm a big believer on that. I love what you're talking about with the breath work, the journaling, the self care. Like, yeah, and for me, yeah, walking, like, I walk and run, but like I know for sure, like stuff that like I'm always amazed at. I'm A, more creative, but B, more settled. When I've had the ability to do that, that bilateral is really important. The plastic surgery was interesting that they did it as out of anger, because I've heard that out of the I'm not good enough. I have heard, partners that have gone like, if I just got my body perfect, that I'm the problem, but I've not heard it out of anger. So that's
Yeah, I
interesting.
could see where that would be the case because lots of times when I go into my shame-based belief of I'm not good enough, right? It does bring up anger. It might for some people. It might
Mhm.
bring up anger, that's a component of shame. But yeah, it seems pretty drastic, doesn't it? Or it seems like a kind of an odd way to deal with your anger. I think that was an extreme case and
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it,
but
but like that
yeah,
one kind of
I
surprised
know
me.
things like
So
that happen. So
yeah. Yeah, I think, I just feel like with so much of this, if we can just slow it down, if it's a good idea today, it'll be a good idea in a few months or whenever, and I'm not knocking plastic surgery. I'm just saying, if it's done as a reaction to something else, then I'm not being intentional and making a choice, for my own good in my own body. So,
yeah.
okay, so we have a question. Our paternalistic society still chooses to label a woman standing in her power as an angry woman simply because they are not in a submissive state when communicating. How do you see this hindering therapists and therapy healing for both the betrayed partner and the addict?
There are so many layers to this question. I
Yes.
say that a lot, but gosh, where do we start? I want to kind of further elaborate on something I said earlier, and that is kind of like the programming we have, right? The belief system we have around anger. And a lot of that does come from, like you said, it can be societal. It can also be familial, part of our family, and how anger is seen. Really interesting. Somebody shared with me this week that there's a family that she just became aware of, and it's a family member that she goes, I text messages were shared with me and their anger back and forth and what they called each other. She goes, I couldn't even imagine that. Well, again, that's kind of the framework of where you kind of come into betrayal trauma with anger. So for some of us, it's that anger is not allowed, especially because you're a woman. Because if you're angry, then you're also bitchy. And so we get these really negative labels.
hmm
And oftentimes I think that we see getting angry and we equate it with power. So oftentimes, I think that we can stand into our power, be very powerful and angry at the same time. And you're right, as a therapist, I can't be afraid of anger. So I have to not only understand anger and how it might present and, how to guide my clients into understanding what's healthy and what's not healthy, and then helping put boundaries around it with my clients, right? How do I share my anger? What's the parameters? What are the boundaries I put into place? And then I need to stand in my truth and speak it, even if the other person reacts. So a lot of that is maybe going against some of that old programming, whether it is you don't speak up and get angry because ladies don't do that or women don't do that, or you need to be nice all the time, or you're labeled something very, very negative, or maybe you've grown up in a home where everything goes. And I have to learn to kind of slow it down, like we keep saying, and stand in my power in a different way. And it doesn't have to be in really, really powerful, destructive words. So I think it's important that as a therapist, when my clients get angry, I need to allow them to get angry. I've got to validate their anger. I need to recognize, okay, what's the source of the anger? And so for me, I want to empower my clients because I do work with a lot of betrayed partners in not only processing their anger in session, but now how do I go out and how do I express it? Because anger is there to get me to do something. It's there to put me in motion. And so, how do we say it? I do believe that we can say really hard things without screaming and yelling and using a format. I love the four-part talking boundary. I repeat it again and again and again because even when I'm angry, I can take a breath and slow it down by sharing, here's what I saw and heard right now.
Hmm.
Here's the stories I'm in, right? Here's my feeling. I am really angry right now. And then I can move into putting a boundary in place with that other person, or I can make a request. Here's what I need from you right now. So I have even told my clients that there are times where stepping back into your power might simply be something like holding up your hand
Hmm. Hmm.
and going, I need to take a
Hmm.
pause here because I'm feeling really angry right now. But we have to learn that awareness. So, part of the anger piece that's so important for a betrayed partner is why am I angry? What's the story I'm in? Right? Where am I feeling it in my body? We typically feel it in our body, right? Very first. So, my anger I know shows up. I get a flood of adrenaline that floods up through my body and back down again the minute my anger is triggered. So, in that moment, that's when I go, okay, I've got all of these tools I can use. So, how am I going to choose in this moment to respond and to step into my anger and use those effective tools? So, whether it's a talking boundary, another great format is the DEAR acronym, where we describe, and then we express, and then we assert, right, the need or the boundary, and then we reinforce. So we can be very assertive. Now, sometimes for women, because there may be a power differential for a variety of reasons, right? It might be I'm in a relationship with somebody who is bigger than me, like my addict partner. Or it might be a power differential, a perceived power differential of this person makes all the money. I'm just a stay at home mom. So now there's this differential. We're not, it's more of a vertical power, not lateral. So it's really important to recognize that and not talk yourself out of being angry and
Hmm.
stuffing it. And recognizing that I have a right to my anger. So, as I work with clients also, it's like, okay, what needs aren't being met that's contributing to your anger? And now let's see, let's have you step into your anger, right? And make it a right. I have a right to be angry. I have been hurt on the deepest level, right? And then, okay, so what are the boundaries I'm going to put in place with others about anger? So what is the framework around them? So if they're angry, I'm not hurt. It's safe. And then what are the boundaries I put into place with myself so that when I'm angry, I'm not hurting? To me, that's where the power lies. And you're right. Women are conditioned to be in that kind of more of a submissive state. But I do believe that a lot of the work needs to be done internally. So we have to take risks. We have to try implementing tools and things we've never done before, and say things that we then can stand in and let whatever happens happens. So if I say something and my anger can be the reason that it's kind of motivated me into setting a boundary, that I do it in a way, that I feel safe, I feel heard. The other person may not react very well. So how can I hold on to my power in that moment and stay set in, nope, my anger has wants me to do this and create this safety, and I'm not backing down. So I think that we have to really get clear on our anger. What's its purpose? And then how do we work through the anger, process the anger, and then how do we implement whatever we need to do, that the anger is making us aware of. So I hope that's some helpful thoughts on that. Do you have anything, Tammy?
Well, yeah, because I do really think, if we use our anger in a constructive way, I mean, really, what is the goal? If I'm seeking safety, if I'm looking to do something different, like you talked about it, if something's not working right now, so what needs to change? How can I find safety? And I probably won't get the best results if I'm outward raging. If I'm able to take a look at, I'm angry, I am justifiably, righteously angry, and I'm looking for this. But if I'm able to state what I'm looking for, I'm probably a little more likely to get, help and input. And then it's problem. How do we, move forward in a different way? How can we problem solve on this particular thing? And yes, I know women are like, it's not nice to be angry, and like, yeah, I was brought up with that whole thing too. And guess what? I ended up with rage, so like, the huge disconnect on that, but it's also, it was absolutely like, Debbie's talking about, like, it was really looking to help me be safe, just not in the most constructive way. So I think a lot of it is identifying what am I looking for, and how do I achieve that goal that would help me be safe without, I was thinking too, when you're talking about, some of the things, and I've heard I went up and I, spent a ton of money, and like all of these things that they later have regret about. So I want to do things that are helpful, and not that, I mean, I hate when I hear, partners go, I've become a person that I could never have imagined, myself being like, because like that feels like an extra burden for them. And so it's always like, how can we, stop that, and find some ways that will be constructive for you to get, support and safety that you need. And revenge sex, I honestly have not heard of one person that was like, oh, I'm really happy I did that. Like, unfortunately for the partners, they're like, I'm mad at myself. I'm, embarrassed, shame, whatever, so it didn't achieve the goal that they were, looking to achieve. I was thinking too, when you talked about, the stuffing, because when you said that 84%, initially of that study that, reported a higher, I kept thinking, I wonder what the other 16%, if they just shut down, like, I don't know. But I'm wondering if they were the, like, oh, anger isn't nice, or just were so
Could
traumatized they
be.
shut down.
It could
Yeah.
be. I wanna go back to the question, and just one little thought that came to me as
Sure.
I read it again. And that is, the question was asked, how does it hinder, like,
Mhm.
this attitude with the addict, that an angry woman, shouldn't be, and they need to be submissive. And I think that, yes, you're right, that shows up. That lots of times, an addict partner will use the betrayed partner's anger against them because it's not ladylike. You shouldn't be that way. You're not nice. You're being the B word, whatever that is.
Mhm.
And so I think that's again where boundaries come into place. You have to recognize personally that no, I have a right to this anger, right? If I'm expressing my anger in the healthiest way possible that I can, because remember I'm learning, then I don't have to be told that I am being irrational, that I am being mean, that my anger isn't warranted. No, I know that it is. And so I have a right to say, no, my anger is justified. I have a right to this anger. This anger is there to protect me. And I think we can verbalize that to the addict partners. But you have to have an internal mindset that my anger is very important. and you're not allowed to minimize it. Just because society says that as a woman, I can't step into my power and be angry. So that might be something that you also work on in couples, because you might have to work a little bit on, okay, how can the addict partner even be able to hold space and allow you to be angry and step into your power too. So just wanted to kind of circle back around on that really quick.
Well, and they commented on therapists, and there are therapists who will buy in with an addict going, "Oh, my wife is just, full of rage," and will kind of collude with the addict, "Oh, oh, no wonder you acted at whatever." Like, so it is, it really is a matter of finding the right people. And even, there's a lot of CSATs that do amazing work, and then there's some that I don't refer to, so it isn't just because you've got the letters that you're magically a wonderful therapist. And, there are others that are really good in one category and all good, like this is the work that they do and they do amazing work in that. But when it gets to something else, that's not their forte. And then, having you make a shift to someone else. And one more thing on that till we get to the next question, but it's also like, the work that you need very early on is different. And then like all of this stuff that Debbie's talking about is kind of higher order. So it may be that somebody does a great job of helping you just get that little foundation going, and then it's time to find someone else. Now, therapist hopping, that isn't recommended either. But if it's like somebody's like sponsors and 12 step, if somebody's helped you with this initial phase and now you go, okay, now I need the next chapter, that, that can be. So there's no like do this for X amount of time and then it's not that linear. So
Mhm.
finding what works for you or for you as a couple is key to this. Okay, what kind of things can I do, or wait, what kind of things can I do to be perceived as assertive rather than aggressive when interacting with others, especially regarding boundaries? I'm a female betrayed partner.
I think one of the best skill sets is to learn how to use that I language, right? And it goes back to what I keep saying is I need to recognize that I have a right to be angry, right? Or I have a right to something. Oftentimes, anger is a response to a violated boundary, or it's in response to behavior that's unacceptable. And so I can literally call it out as that. Now, being aggressive to me means that I'm saying you this and you that, and you always and you never. My voice is getting loud. I make it higher and higher and higher. And I have to tell you, I had to work through a lot of anger in my betrayal trauma days. And because I thought I was conditioned that in order for people to hear you when there's a disagreement, you just raise your volume a little bit. And if they don't get it, you raise your volume some more. And then you raise it some more. So if you're doing that, that's more aggressive. If you're using shame and bringing shame around and saying, you're never going to get this because you're an addict. Once an addict, always an addict. Who do you think you are? Talking to me about anger, and so that's aggressive. So if what I'm doing is going to hurt that individual some way, mentally, emotionally, physically, right? In that moment is aggression. And I've got to think about assertive is something they may not like. So I'm very clear. I'm stating it from my viewpoint. I need this. I heard this. I saw this. I'm angry about this because, right, rather than using you language. So it's very, very important that you recognize maybe even going to a therapist and going, help me. And I've done this with clients. Help me figure out how to say this so I sound assertive. A lot of clients will get into a lot of explaining, right? And then they get frustrated and get angry, or they hold on to it, hold on to it, hold on to it. And all of a sudden the anger just, explodes like a tea kettle. And then they're very aggressive in their anger. So again, you've got to slow it down, get curious about the anger. What's it there for? What is the need or what is the violation,
Mhm.
that's occurring? And then how can I express it to my partner using I language? That's why I love the 4-part talking boundary. I love using dear. I think that's a great way to assert, here's what I need because, without going into because you do this, this, and this. No, I need this and share what you need because I need safety. I need connection. I'm not feeling that way. Totally different when you do it that way. Totally different.
Thank you all for the questions. Thanks, Deb, for the great topic. Yes, it's pervasive, especially early on in the hurt. So these are all tools that we can use to move forward on a different path. I put the Empowered Women's Retreat information, and the work groups are starting again. The Betrayed Partner starts on 2/21, and the Men's Sex Addiction 101 starts again on March 1st. So check those out. Everything's on Seeking Integrity. This webinar will be posted there by Monday. I'm not sure yet today. I'll see. But anyway, so thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.